Hi everybody, it's Christine at Ziedman Development, and today I'd like to walk you through the integration between JustGiving and Razor's Edge using Importacular. So I've already authorized the connection between the two systems, so I'm not going to show that right now, but I am going to get started by clicking on JustGiving and clicking Start. So if you haven't already authorized that, when you click Start, it's going to ask you for your information in order to authorize that connection. So when you first click this, you're going to select between payments and created pages, and for the purpose of what we're doing today, we are going to work with payments. Those do include gift aid. Now I've got some dates already set up in here, and I'm going to actually tweak those just a little bit. So I'm going to move this back, and I'm going to move this one back as well. The reason for that is just because I'm using a sample database and I don't have a lot of gift history, and that's a range I do. So once we get a range where you have gift history, you do have to work with a 3-month time period for each session. Then you can select the payments that you want to include. So you just need to tick that box. And then you need to decide if you want to work with donations or refunds. So for right now, we are going to work with donations. I'm going to go ahead and leave that. Click OK. It's going to load the transactions I have to work with. And then I can choose to either work with an existing template if I have them by clicking on the drop down, or clicking on the green circle with the plus sign to create a new template. We are going to actually work with a template that I've already started. We're going to edit that template. I'm going to walk you through what I have. I'm also going to show you how to add a few things as we go. So when you build your first template, you always start with a constituent mapping. That is this box on the upper left-hand corner. Once it's there, you can't add it a second time. So that's why it's grayed out. But the first time you open this, that will be unlocked and everything else will be grayed out. So I want to show you what I have there. So that constituent mapping is a lot of the information that's on Bio 1 and Bio 2 of a constituent record. So you can see for the first name, I've selected the JustGiving field of donor first name. So anything in the source field is the data coming directly out of JustGiving. Anything in the default value is something that you're assigning to these records that may or may not be in JustGiving. Most of the time it's not. So you can also see at the end of the row for donor first name, I have some additional settings on that field. So let's open those so you can see what those settings do. So our settings here are doing a couple of things. First of all, I've opted to only add the first name field to a new constituent. I'm not changing anything on existing constituents. Second of all, I've opted to make it proper case. So those are a couple of the things that you can do with these. We could also add some conditions. We could do some data transformations, but those are things I don't need to do for this field, so we're going to leave them as they are. Let's go ahead and scroll down so you can see a few more things that I have here set up. I've added my nickname as something to add to my mapping. And then I've also used my default values here because I wanted to add a primary addressee and a primary salutation, wanted to use those formulas. And again, I've got some field settings, so I'm only adding those to my new constituents. I don't want to change existing constituents. Added my surname, and then I also have my receipt information as required by Razor's Edge. So anything with that green circle on with a check mark in it does have to have a populated field because it is required by Razor's Edge. Whether that's a black box standard or for your organization, it is required to create a record. So we filled in all of our fields here, and then we can work with other things. So if we wanted to add a constituent code, let's go ahead and do that. We've got to give it a mapping name, and then we can opt to work with either a source field or a default value. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work with the source, just a default value, and say I want to use the type of friend. Now, if you add dates to that, you can of course do that. You can also work with settings for the whole mapping. So that's what those are at this level. Those are area settings. So we could work with the entire constituent code, including to and from dates, by working with the area settings. We've got options here for adding solicit codes, adding consent, adding additional addressees and citations. You can also add a declaration mapping here. So you just go ahead and click and add that. Next tab that we're going to work with today is our address tab. And so here we've got our address. So you can see I've mapped the fields that I have for my address here, as well as some default values. So I added a default value for my info source of JustGiving, and I've added a default value to say that I want all of these addresses to be preferred and I want them to have mail sent to this address. Now, question you may ask is, if these constituents are existing, what happens with the addresses? Great question. That's where we work with our area settings for the entire address. We can choose to always add the new address no matter what. We can add the new address only when there's no existing match found. We can always update the preferred address. We can ignore when matched but add new addresses. So the difference between this and the one that's already selected is that the one that's selected will update the address if it matches. The one at the bottom will ignore it when it matches. So depending on what you want your outcome to be, you can choose accordingly. We've also got match settings here. So in the UK, the default is to match to the postcode. You could add to that and say it has to match the postcode and address line 1, postcode and address type, however that needs to meet your needs, but that's what that does. We can also back up the address. So if we're adding a new preferred address and we want to save that previous preferred address, tick the box, and then we're going to go ahead and select an address type for those addresses that are now going to become previous addresses. We can add an end date and we can remove the send mail. We can also remove the date too if we're updating an existing address. So go ahead and look at those. And then on the second tab, if you have constituent relationship paid destinations, you can work with those here. You can also opt to ignore some blank addresses on existing constituents there as well. Go ahead and save that. We've also got an email address map. So this one's a pretty straightforward mapping. I've got the email address in the phone number row. I have a phone type in that row. If I wanted to add do not contact, inactive, or primary, I can do that as well as adding comments if we want to. There are some area settings on this also. So if you wanted to work with matching what's already in Razor's Edge and what happens with that, and if you also want to avoid some duplicate email types, you can use our hierarchies here as well. So since we have all of that, let's go ahead and let's look at our gift mapping. So I've got a gift mapping set up already. So let's go ahead and make that just a bit bigger. So I have filled in a lot of defaults for things like campaign fund and appeal. You could also work with source fields for those as well. You can see I have a source field for my gift amount and for my gift date. You can see that I use that same date for my NL post date. In the United States, that would be your GL. In the UK, it's the NL. And I've added that receipt amount. And then we've got our gift type there. I do have this defaulting to common fields. I don't recommend using scheduling unless you're working with a gift that has a schedule, such as a pledge or a recurring gift. Not a recurring gift payment, recurring gift. And I don't recommend using all fields unless you have a very unique situation where you're working with other gift types besides cash. So if you're working with a straight cash gift, most likely all you need are the common fields. Now, once you have your gift mapped, then you can add gift attributes, you can add gift notepads, you can work with split gifts. Areas below that are generally only available with paid destinations. So if those are things you need, of course, reach out to our team and we're happy to help. Once you have your template set up, we can save and close just like I did there. And in order to move forward, we're going to need to create a control report. So let's call this our Just Giving control report. I do recommend you make a new control report every time you import for real so you have a good history. If you want to look at just a few records, you can always tick the box and select just a limited number. I've only got 14, so I don't need to do that, but I think it's good for you to know that you can. And if you're a little bit nervous or if you want to query for any reason, you can always tick the box and create a query of new and updated constituents. I'm going to go ahead and leave that blank for right now, and I'm going to click continue. That will take us to our review screen once it's matched our data to the records in Razor's Edge. And when we're in our review screen, we can see our records and we can decide if we want these to go into Razor's Edge as they are or if we want them to do something else. So we can see if it says create, we're going to create a record. If it says update, it's going to update an existing record. So we've got several creates and several updates over here. We've got some links. So this constituent in my sample database has made 2 gifts on the same day. So rather than creating 2 accounts, we're creating one and we're updating the other. We can review all of our data and we can see everything that's mapped, and we can make changes in any field that is a text field. So we can literally come in and type here and change it as we go. Lots of things we can do, and then we validate our data before we enter anything into the Razor's Edge. Oh, we've got some exceptions, so we would definitely want to review those exceptions before we import it. I hope this helps you understand a little bit about how this process works. Thank you so much for joining me, and have a great day.